Hello and welcome to the GoodPractice Podcast, a weekly show about work performance and learning. I'm Ross Dickie, and this week we're talking about the relationship between L&D and HR. As ever, I'm joined by Owen Ferguson. Hello, Owen.
Hello, Ross.
Along with guest Steve Browne, who is Vice President of HR at La Rosa's Pizzeria. Is that right, Steve?
Yes, Ross, that's correct.
You guys are a pizzeria chain that's based in Ohio?
Yes, we're over in the States. So long distance podcast today. Very cool.
Yeah. I spend quite a lot of time in Chicago because my girlfriend is from there and lives there currently. So I have a fondness for Chicago style pizza. I don't know what differentiates Ohio pizza from Illinois pizza, but
Chicago is deep dish and very tomato based. We're thinner and better.
I like it. I'll need to come and try it sometime. But yeah, anyway, so we're talking today about the relationship between L&D and HR. And Steve, I'll start with you. So in your opinion, what exactly do the roles of L&D and HR entail, and where do they overlap?
I think they overlap quite a bit because in both factors, you're trying to deal with and work with people. So L&D may be more of a function and a specialization within a company where HR could be wrapped with them somewhat, but often L&D is on its own. What development track do you want to have? Are you trying to develop people and become high potentials? Do you want to move them ahead? Is it part of succession planning? It's more, here at least in the States, of an organizational development effort than just learning and development. It's not as specialized, like I'm just sending you to class. HR, on the other hand, would be on top of, why are we developing them? Should they be developed? Are we wasting our time? You don't want to say that, but it's not just. It shouldn't be just a catch-all. I think the overlap is hard at times because they tend to be siloed instead of integrated. I think that's true with HR and organizations in general, and to be specialized even further just makes people more likely. I go to L&D if I need them when there's a problem, instead of seeing them as a true value add and a way to move people ahead and make them better for the company.
Yeah, you've got this range of activities that fall under this the people remit, don't you? You've got recruitment and talent planning and learning and development, and you've got employment law and employee relations and performance management and reward and employee engagement and organizational development. You've got all this stuff, and specializing in those areas is natural. In large HR functions in particular. I mean, in smaller organizations, all that stuff is often managed by one or two people. But the specialism is particularly in these large HR functions. But I think sometimes to believe that they actually exist in the real world as separate things is slightly delusional. You cannot say that how you recruit and develop people has no impact on employee engagement. The idea that you can separate out reward from performance management and talent planning, I think, there's a mistake there. So the roles overlap everywhere. It's, just as you said, Steve, like it's they all have to work together, and the real challenge is how do you work across those grey areas while still recognizing that there are specialist skills, and it not feeling like you're stepping on someone else's toes if you do have to work on a project where that does step over kind of these multiple areas that kind of fall under that HR people umbrella.
I think it's okay to step on toes. I'm a little different when it comes to that, because from an HR role, if I can pull L&D in and tie them to operations or tie them to finance or tie them to marketing and be the person who makes those connections and is that bridge, then I think it's okay. If you're stepping on toes just to be a bully, that's not good. But someone has to take the lead. I think that's hard for L&D on its own to do that because people see it as an extra, as an overhead, as a if I need it. Instead of saying it's necessary, I think key to the engagement side is we have to see people as talent, period. Not talent like the catchphrase, like, I'm in talent. Everybody is talented. Talent needs to be developed. If not, it wanes, it atrophies, it's horrible. So if we don't give people attention to grow them in their role across the organization, We're just wasting time, and we have a bunch of robots running around doing jobs, but they're not really functioning at the best possible potential they could be.
Steve, how's it set up at La Rosa's? Or what is your sort of day-to-day interaction with the L&D function like?
I am the L&D function. Yay!
Okay. So your interaction is pretty good then.
Yes, as well as the head of all things HR, what Owen was saying earlier. The thing that's different here, and we just started this about 7 months ago, my boss said that he wanted me to do development, not training and development. And I said, what does that mean? He says, I don't know. That's up to you. So what I've been doing is we have 13 locations, and I have general managers and assistant managers. And what we found is 90% of their time is with people. And yet we train them on labor cost, food cost, a lot of P&L and finance things. And they're dealing with, gee, Steve's not doing his job. And how do I have better interactions? So our development is very, very people-centric. We're becoming much more of a human-centric organization, period. And what I'm trying to do is development is, if I can prove and show how human-centric behavior works, you will foster engagement instead of expect engagement. You will see engagement because I'm focusing on you differently. So I'm equipping people with skills such as, this is going to sound radical. After the first class, I told people that they needed to say hi and thank you to every team member every day for 30 days. So after the first month, when they came back, of the 13 GMs that we had, 6 of them did it, which is fantastic. The other 7 said, it's just a silly waste of time because it's, another one of those, flavor of the month things. I said, okay, for the 6 who did it, how did it go? They said, oh man, the people we thought that were awful are wonderful. I said, how about that? Did you change people? They go, no, we're just paying attention to them. I said, great. So here's your assignment for the next 30 days. Say hi and thank you to every person, whether you like them or not. The next month, 8 of them did it instead of 13. So it's an ongoing process. I think one of the real challenges from the L&D community and the HR community is we want this umbrella that covers everything for all things at all times. That's the silver bullet theory. If I put it in this program, everyone will be engaged. And it's the biggest myth and lie ever. If I can grab a few people here and add a little more and add a little more, over time we'll get better.
Yeah. So, Steve, you were talking earlier, you're sort of alluding to the fact that generally in organizations, though not La Rosa's, L&D and HR are siloed. You are not in that position because you cover both functions, so you only have to communicate with yourself. But, how generally could you encourage collaboration between those functions?
I think one way to do it is get out of the practice of going to. I go to HR. I go to L&D. HR and L&D should be across the organization horizontally and cross the silos. Because within functions, marketing needs to be marketing, which is awesome. But they have people. So if they have people, HR and L&D can cut across them. So instead of saying we're separate functions, they need to be integrated functions. But HR and L&D have to lead their way. They can't keep saying, well, gee, we wish and we hope it'll happen someday. We need to be more intentional to say, I'm making it happen. I'm going to get to know your people on purpose. This is going to be tough. But I understand how dysfunctional you are because you all talk to me anyway. So since you're dysfunctional, let me help you be more functional. But HR needs to say, I'm not willing to be a silo anymore, same as L&D. You can't keep being on the sidelines going, boy, I hope they pick me, because they're never going to.
HR and L&D do have this wonderful opportunity because of the remit they have to work across those silos that you mentioned, Steve. But sometimes, and actually, I speak to a lot of people working in learning and development in particular, but also who work in HR, and they do a great job of that. I think that the recognition that they need to get close to the business has not just act as a kind of passive support function receiving requests, like they're only brought in when there's a problem to be solved, but kind of like proactively going and engaging with the business. That's becoming far more common. It's certainly more common now than it was 10, 15 years ago. I still think sometimes that within that kind of HR people discipline, those silos still exist, and get awful caught up on the differences and exactly whose remit it is. And like, for example, I can think of a number of situations when I've been in the past. I've been working in HR, working in learning and development, and HR have taken on a project that you would think that naturally falls under learning and development's remit, and I wonder why it is that we've not been brought in. And I think probably the answer is it's a really exciting project, and HR have turned around and said, well, we're going to have that.
Sure.
I've worked in a number of organizations where that's happened, where it's like, it'll go to learning and development if it's, if we don't like the sound of it, but if it's something that's more exciting, management development was quite often that kind of piece. Right. Learning and development did kind of like, product training or system stuff or what have you. But as soon as it became something that touched the higher echelons of the organization, you said, "Oh no, we're going to have that. I'm going to apply because we're the business partners in this relationship." Whereas there's an opportunity there to bring in specialist skills. So I think that the first step is that recognition that specialist skills do exist within the function, and that, but also that they are heavily interrelated. There's no point in learning and development going off and doing something on its own. We've spoken on this podcast a number of times about how you cannot change something that's systemic just with a learning intervention. If the incentives and the reward mechanisms don't align to what the organization wants its people to do.
I agree wholeheartedly. I think the way to step in, the pretty, it's pretty and it's shiny, that shouldn't be a standard. It's what's the strategy, and how do you take a look at the strategic view of each function? So L&D, if we do this movement or this remit, what's it going to do to the organization? How's it going to help? Not what's getting done. One of the things we're trying here is organizationally, instead of saying, what do people do? We see, what do we want it to be? So if we said, we want finance to be this, then we can step back and say, L&D needs to plug in here, HR needs to plug in here, outside consultants need to plug in here, and we have more of a map so that it builds up into what we want to be. Then you're using the skills and strengths of each function instead of saying it's my project versus your project. Because, boy, people step in my field every day. And I'm like, hey, that's kind of mine. And they go, well, when it gets ugly, it's yours. Like, no. I get all of it all the time. What's interesting in people that I know that work in larger organizations where the functions are more naturally split or they're departmental, I've encouraged them to say, be available, show up, get to know the people, be there every day going, how's it going, Owen? How are you doing today? Anything going on? What we miss is we focus on project work and tasks instead of relationships. If we have a natural relationship across organizations, they're going to say, I need to talk to Owen and pick up Ross because they need to be a part of this because we're already tied together. If it's only about the work, we're going to be forgotten often.
Yeah, I think you mentioned a key thing there, Steve, building those internal relationships in a way that you can keep your finger on the pulse of what's going on means that you're almost able to highlight where you can add value. If you don't know what's going on, then you're never going to know until someone decides to come along because that's part of, now it's time to bring in L&D rather than proactively saying, do you know what, actually, it would be quite good to be involved in some of those meetings earlier on. Do you mind if I come along? Exactly.
One of the things that we did because of that, and it's not fun because I know we're on a podcast. If you look over my shoulder, people on the audience, this audio, we just turned a model into where we took our organization and flipped it upside down. So the head of our operations, our pizzerias, where we make our great pizza, where it's better than it is in Chicago. Let me remind you that again. At the pizzerias, we said without the pizzerias, we don't exist. So we turn the organization to say, where's the operational hub? And then instead of support systems, we became resources. Because if I'm support, it's if I need you when. If I'm a resource, I'm valued. So we've had to change L&D, HR, and other people that say, you are a resource for pizzerias. How are you going to do that? And to the pizzerias, we said, you can't do this on your own. Let us help you with resources. And it's really helped our behavior towards each other, our accessibility towards each other. And then when we get the troll that doesn't want to play nice, it's a lot easier to see and go, hey, quit being a jerk. We're having a lot more tough conversations. But it's helping us do healthier L&D, healthier HR practices than we have in the past.
Yeah. I think it's the investment in time in developing those relationships that it can seem like a waste. First of all, it's like you're just having a catch up to find out what's going on in your world, and that stuff can be a waste of time right up until the moment when it's not. When you get an early indication that something's going on that you can add value to, and you put up your hand and say, I'd quite like to be involved. You do need to build time in to develop those relationships, and in some areas it's more natural than other. In HR business partnering functions, where that's kind of what they do, but I think it's important to do that even if you're in a specialized role, is to get to know the business, get closer to the people in the business, and develop those relationships.
I agree. What we did was an experiment. I said, okay, of your day, how much of your day is spent talking about people? And they go, oh gosh, 100%. Okay, so since we're talking about people, who works with people? And they go, I don't know, you do. I go, well, that's interesting. And what we've done is turn it around, because we don't talk about things. We don't talk about work. We don't talk about deadlines and projects. We talk about people. Now, we may say, Steve missed a deadline, doggone it. But the thing, then this is how I feel about Steve. You have instant performance management you can talk about. You can talk about coaching. You can talk about developing their skills. It's just intertwined in right in front of you, but we make it this big landscape instead of saying our relationships drive our work. In most organizations, the work ruins the relationships and splits people up, and it's time to turn that around.
To what extent do you think L&D and HR are in competition? When I was trying to plan ahead for this episode and come up with a title, because we sort of have to plan all that in advance, I was talking to Ross Garner, the other host of this podcast, and his suggestion was, as a title, Are L&D and HR in Competition? And what we were talking about before was there's so much overlap, talent management, talent acquisition, all of these sorts of things, where they have their remit is very similar, and they're sort of competing for resources. They're also, I think, under pressure in a lot of organizations to demonstrate their value and sort of to justify their position within the organization. So is that something that you recognize? Absolutely.
I'm connected to HR people and L&D people all over the globe, and people tend to talk about, look what I do, look at me, look at this, I do this. And you go, well, are you tied to this? No, I do this. You're like, that's really cool. Do you deal with anybody or just you? And what's really funny is, as professions where we struggle, HR and L&D, and the reason we compete is this. When we become self-focused, it absolutely splits us apart. When we become others-focused, it ties us together. And I think we need to be others-focused in what we do. We have the American Training and Development Association, ATD. It used to be ASTD, and it had as many initials as you could have possible. And what's funny is they have smaller, very specialized, wonderful content orientation in their events and their conferences. And you go, so how do you work within the organization? And the battle cry is, we don't. We're fierce. We're on our own. And I'm like, then you're going to be irrelevant. The problem with our competition is when it drives us apart, it makes us more irrelevant, both HR and L&D, where we hold on to our ground no matter what. It's like Game of Thrones. We're going to be killed by somebody. We just don't see it coming. So I think there's unneeded competition. That's the problem, where we don't value what the other side brings. where we should say we complement each other in certain places, and in other places we don't. And the places that we don't, they should thrive in what they do, instead of saying we compete to tear us apart. There's enough room for everybody. There really is.
Yeah, it's interesting you should mention that, actually, because I think about the L&D focused conferences that I've been to, and in some of the HR events, when they're talking about working with different functions, it's nearly always about the client function that they're working with. It's about working closer with the business and getting closer to the business. And very rarely do you hear people talking about, well, we worked with our brilliant colleagues in HR, and together, we did this amazing thing for the sales teams. Or HR saying, well, we were working with the customer service function, and we thought, what we should do? We'll bring in our amazing colleagues in learning and development. You just don't hear that quite so much. And there is a kind of I don't know if it's competition, but it's a kind of it's almost like the perception of from the learning and development sphere is that HR sees them as a training function rather than something that's more performance focused, and I think learning and development people feel belittled by HR quite often.
Right. I like what Ross said of people feeling they always have to prove their value. Again, I think a little differently. Value is based by what others see, not by what I say. So when I say, here's my ROI, and here's my drop to the bottom line, and here's my this, what shows me is you're spending so much time trying to hit a number or hit a metric instead of saying, this is how I made the organization better. And the people who were evidently better because of the efforts that were done through L&D, they go, oh yeah, I'm better because, watch, I went to this course and I learned these things and now I'm doing this much better. And we can see it through their performance. Value is not driven by screaming in the wind. Value is seen by the behavior that makes the organization better. But L&D and HR need to turn that around instead of trying to, we add value to the business because we are the business. We don't have to be added to the business. We are. Doggone it. If everybody's talking about people every day, it's HR and L&D every day. It's not all these other functions where it gets more prominence. I just think they're willing to be more confident. And we're willing to go, you're the best. Woohoo! Instead of saying, we're good too. And sometimes you suck. And let's be honest about that.
I think that's possibly quite a nice note to sort of round up the sort of general conversation, unless there is something else you feel we haven't mentioned yet, Steve.
The thing I would add, Ross, is this. Why can't we get along? Instead of saying it's a competition, we say, what brings us together? So we're a very beautiful profession as a whole. And there's different parts of that profession that accentuate. There's L&D, there's training just by itself. Training is a function, on-the-job training, skill-based training. There's the strengths movement of, hey, we're only going to lift people up based on strengths and we're going to quit trying to build up weaknesses. There's so much growth that instead of looking at separate functions of pieces of the pie, we're one big tapestry, and how do we accentuate each other? So I'd rather have, why can't we get along instead of why do we keep beating each other up?
Yeah. And the other thing I would say is one of the things that we've spoken about quite a lot on this podcast is taking a more holistic view of the challenges. So a particular function is wanting to change behavior in some way, shape, or form. You're not going to do that through a sort of traditional learning and development activity. You have to look at the whole system and ask yourself, why are people not behaving in the way that we would like them to? And quite often it's because the incentives are misaligned in some way, shape, or form. And that's a conversation with the senior management, but also you've got specialists working in HR around reward and performance management. And so bringing them into the conversation, having a discussion around how can we change these things? What not just putting in a single initiative, but how do you put in a package of initiatives geared towards changing behavior in the way that we're looking to achieve? And you'd be amazed at the insight and the collaboration that you can get simply by involving people. So just as as, if you're working in learning and development, you would like to be involved at an earlier stage, why not bring other people into that process with you?
Agreed. I think that's wonderful. The other thing I would like to add, not to drag things on,
sorry,
is this. I think L&D and HR need to go to senior leadership on purpose. Don't wait for them to come up in some magic room off in the mountains that they have some, elixir that they want to see happen. Because chances are they have very little context. They're so broad-based in their roles. So they'll react to a problem and say, we need learning and development around this problem, instead of saying, contextually, how much is that really affecting us? We have the perspective in HR and L&D to take it to them and say, look, in my organization, I work directly with the CEO, the COO, and the president every day. And I go to them and I say, hey, I know you want to do this, but have you looked at this bigger picture, the holistic view, like you said, Owen? So instead of waiting for them to attack and drive, which is what they do very well, give them context so that you're more maneuvering them to where the organization can go. We have a great place to lead in that space, both from HR and L&D, instead of waiting to implement. We need to do both sides very well. Lead, give context, and then as it comes to life, design and implement.
So we'll move on now to our regular feature, What I Learned This Week, where we share something we learned in the past 7 days. Owen, would you like to kick us off?
Oh, sure thing, Ross. So
You're surprised I came to you first, aren't you?
Yeah, I know, shocked and stunned. Regular podcast listeners may remember me occasionally mentioning gardening last year because I started a new vegetable patch in some raised beds. And basically, if I was to boil down last year, I would say that the radishes did really well, but my carrots were an unmitigated disaster. So I had these amazing above the ground leaves that led me to think that there was something extraordinary underneath the soil. But when I pulled them out, they were really pathetic. So this year I have investigated why that might have been, because I didn't want to repeat the same mistakes. And it turns out that I made a fundamental error. Carrots do best in light sandy soil. And I have the exact opposite of that. I've got heavy clay soil that is entirely unsuited to deep-rooted vegetables like carrots. So this year, I've gone for veg that do well in clay soil. So I'm going for cauliflower and broccoli to see if I have any more success with them. So listeners can expect regular gardening updates on how my cauliflower and broccoli are getting on, because I am now obsessed.
I think we should call this segment, How Did Your Garden Grow?
Wait, does that mean I need to also think of something that I learned this week as well? Because this is good fuel for that.
No, we'll let you off this week. I think that's good. Steve, what did you learn this week?
I was in Philadelphia this past weekend talking to HR graduate students, the future of our profession. And what was fun is when I got a chance to come, I'm a big tie-dye person, if you don't know that. For the listeners on the podcast, if Owen and Ross can see in my office, I have lava lamps and peace signs. I'm kind of a hippie. I just can't grow my hair long anymore. And as I walked off the elevator to get ready to give my presentation, you're so focused on being the speaker and having the message and all this stuff. All the students had tie-dye on. And I went, what's this? They said, well, we knew you were coming, so we wanted to make you feel included. I'm like, are you kidding me? So these are people who are meeting with employers, and they all wore blazers over their tie-dye to look professional. And I said, now that's awesome. So inside, it was a great analogy to me that, all the color and stuff is like the carrots, Owen. Looks good on the top, but is the bottom match? Here the tie-dye matches. They're like, this is who we really are. And yeah, we'll put the coat on just to kind of fool you. But inside, we're this cool, vibrant group of people. Loved them. Just had such a good time. Laughed our faces off. And now I know that the kids who never would have had tie-dye ever in their lives, now are going to wear it and go, hey, this was fun.
Wonderful. So I didn't have to think too hard this week for what I learned this week, because yesterday I went on a first aid training course for work. So I am now a certified first aider, which is slightly terrifying actually, because I feel like I now have enough knowledge to help somebody, but I don't know if it's quite a lot of pressure actually having to perform CPR or, use a defibrillator. And I now know how to...
You volunteered for this, Ross.
I did volunteer for it. Well,
did you not think it through?
I never thought I'd actually have to use it, and then it occurred to me yesterday. I was sitting thinking while we're going through the course, what if I actually have to perform CPR on one of my colleagues? But yeah, no, it was fascinating, and I do feel a lot more confident now. Just about very simple things like how would you go about treating a nosebleed? What would you do with a nosebleed?
I would look up on Google.
Have a person lean forward.
Blood streaming all over the keyboard. Google, what should I do?
My nosebleed. All right, okay. No,
yes. Yeah. Not another person's nosebleed.
Yeah, I'd probably stick a couple of tissues up my nose.
Well, that's what a lot of people do, and I think another thing is tilt your head back and pinch your nose. But apparently, those are all terrible things to do. So, sticking the tissues up your nose, although a lot of people are inclined to do it because they want something to sort of stem the bleeding. As soon as you remove the tissues from your nose, that sort of removes the clot that's formed, and your nose starts bleeding again. So it's just sort of it's things like that.
Wait a minute, Rod. You're not going to leave it there. What are you supposed to do?
So you should actually pinch. So rather than pinching the sort of top of your nose, pinch the bottom of your nose, the sort of soft part of your nose, and tilt your head forward, and that allows a clot to form.
Forward.
So there you go. Gruesome and
so we had carrots,
or slightly more gruesome what I learned this week.
Woohoo!
Yeah.
Oh wow. Well, I have to, Ross. I feel safer already.
Well, you'll be relieved to know that Sai is also qualified, and there'll be quite a few other people doing the course, so you will not have to rely solely on me if anything goes wrong. And that is all for this week. If you'd like to share your thoughts on the show, you can find us all on Twitter. Owen is
at Owen Ferguson.
Steve is
at S Browne with an EHR.
And Steve, you also have a newsletter. Is that right?
I have the HRNet, which is a global newsletter. People can email me at sbrowne, so it's SBROWNE at larosas, LAROSAS.com. I'd be glad to add you on and get you more connected to the global HR community.
Excellent. And you can tweet me at Ross_Dickie. You can also tweet at GoodPractice or at GoodPracticeAUS. To find out more about GoodPractice, our performance support toolkit, bespoke e-learning, and LMS, visit goodpractice.com. Next week, I'll be back with James McCluckey and guest Doug Shaw to talk about how we manage uncertainty in the workplace. Thanks for listening. Bye for now.